Hello friends, this is the JOOLA Perseus IV. It's the newest release from JOOLA after a drama-filled and controversial 2024 when their hugely anticipated Gen 3 paddles got banned right after launch and their equally popular mod TA15 was recently retired because it was too powerful. Their new Pro 4 line has some new tech in the core that adds dwell time and reduces vibration, and while it is a power paddle, it falls below the firepower of the mod TA15, keeping it in spec with the newest paddle regulations. First, a disclosure. JOOLA gave me these paddles to test for a potential review with no obligations. No money changed hands, and JOOLA did not have any input on this video's production or get to preview it before it was published. But if you use my affiliate code to purchase one of these paddles or the link in the description, it doesn't cost you anything, and I get a commission which helps this channel and allows me to keep making videos like this. First, a point of clarification about what exactly is being launched today. Today's launch will include the Perseus IV in both the 16mm and 14mm thicknesses, and the Agassi Pro, also in both thicknesses. In this review, I'm only discussing the Perseus since I haven't had much time with the Agassi. There are also two variances for these paddles, one that's dual certified, which is being launched now, and a UPAA only certified paddle, which will be launched later. The difference is that the UPAA only paddle has more texture due to slightly different regulations. I only tested the dual certified paddle, so I can't say for sure yet whether or not the extra grit on the UPAA exclusive paddles provides additional spin. But suffice it to say, if you want to be sure you can play with this paddle at all sanctioned tournaments, then I'd recommend going for the dual certified paddle, which is on sale right now. And it gets good spin despite having less grit. These paddles cost $280. There are no discounts offered for the first 60 days after launch, and after that period, you can get 10% off with the code Johnkew. And if you want to support this channel, you can use my affiliate code or link right now at no cost to you. The Perseus is an elongated paddle, and you can check out the dimensions in this graphic on the screen now. The static weight comes in just above 8 ounces for the 16mm and just under 8 ounces for the 14mm. So let's get to the brass tacks here. What's different about these paddles? JOOLA is introducing what they're calling TFP, which stands for Tech Flex Power. And they're adding TFP to the propulsion core, which they rolled out in their Gen 3 paddles, and it's what's still being used in their 3S paddles. Basically, the older propulsion core has 2 layers of foam surrounding a polypropylene honeycomb core. Like all thermoform paddles, there's a layer of perimeter foam, but inside that, there's another layer of softer white foam between the polypropylene core and the top and the sides of the paddle. Here's an x-ray of the Perseus 3S, so the paddle that JOOLA launched before the current Perseus 4. It shows edge foam surrounding the entire perimeter of the paddle and a thicker layer of foam between the edge channel and the polypropylene, but just along the edges and top. This gives the polypropylene core a peninsula shape, kind of like a diving board. And what they're calling Tech Flex is higher density foam placed along the shoulders of the paddle. Here's an x-ray comparing the Perseus 4 on the left versus the Perseus 3S on the right. You can see the foam inserts on the Perseus 4 low on the shoulders. The TFP foam is actually placed on the outside of the edge foam, so it effectively pushes the edge foam further up into the interior of the paddle. So JOOLA actually had some paddles dissected for us to look at the launch event in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago, and I dissected one here at home also. Opening up the paddle, you can see that the yellowish foam at the shoulders is the TFP inserts, and it's clear how these inserts are placed outside of the edge foam, which bends in here toward the polypropylene core. Pressing your fingers into this foam, you can feel that it's soft, but not as soft as the white foam in the propulsion core component. Looking at the profile of the surface layers under a microscope, you can see a traditional 3-ply layup of unidirectional carbon fiber sheets topped with a peel-ply texture. I also inspected the polypropylene to check for any type of crushing or damage from the foam inserts. In plan view, you can see that there's no cell compression caused from shearing force, and in profile, there's no significant crushing suffering from compression. These types of damage were both evident in their earlier compressed cores, such as the Mod TA15. JOOLA told us recently that they stopped compressing their cores after it became clear that it led to early breakage in their Gen 3s and Mod TA15s. They did not compress the cores of the 3S models, and so far they've been more durable than their paddles with compressed cores. And as you can see in this dissected profile, they also haven't compressed the core of the Perseus IV. So I do have some confidence that the JOOLA 4s will be more durable than the Mod TA15s and more similar to the 3S models, since they're not compressing the cores. But it's still too early to say how durable these paddles will be overall, as I'll discuss in more detail later. I ran my usual testing protocol on these paddles, capturing ball spin and speed with a Doppler radar signature and taking measurements of swing weight, twist weight, and balance point, and then combining these data into various metrics to help characterize the paddle's performance. The boxes at the top of this graphic give you the raw numbers, and the radar chart on the bottom shows where these numbers fall in terms of percentiles for nearly 300 paddles in my database. High values over on the left side of the chart indicate more firepower, and high values on the right relate to the paddle's control and forgiveness. Lastly, the bottom of the chart tells you about maneuverability and hand speed. By the way, these radar charts are available for nearly every paddle in my database, so head on over to JohnKewPickleball.com or follow this link on the screen to check that out. What you can see here with the 16mm Perseus IV is the signature of a power paddle with a high power score and slightly less pop. Spin is 2112 RPM, which is good, but it shows as average on this chart because most of my metrics come from top-tier spin paddles. So being right in the middle here actually makes this top tier. Twist weight is slightly below average and balance point is above average. Although swing weight and balance point are above average, they are actually lower than most other elongated paddles. So hand speed on the Perseus IV is predictably lower than smaller, lighter paddles, but better than most other elongated paddles. And twist weight, which correlates to the width of the sweet spot, is slightly below average. But as I'll discuss later, this paddle plays above its twist weight, and the sweet spot on the Perseus IV does feel good. Here are the metrics for the 14mm Perseus IV. You can see the radar chart is similar with three main differences. First, there's more pop and slightly less power. Second, the 14mm Perseus IV has a lower swing weight, and lastly, a lower twist weight. My unit also got slightly better spin than the 16mm, but this might be just within the margin of error. Combining power and pop into a metric called firepower, you can see the Perseus IV paddles fall very much in line with the Perseus 3S paddles that were released last year. Other popular paddles on the market with similar firepower include the Paddletech Bantam ESQC and ALWC, the Franklin C45, and Carbon True Foam. So when you consider that the most powerful paddles on the market, such as the Gearbox Pro Power Elongated and Mod TA15, are being sunset this year, this puts the Perseus IV paddles in the mid to top tier power category. The Perseus IV paddles have a pleasant feel when hitting the ball, especially for a power paddle. The feel of the face is sort of soft and springy, and there's very little vibration. That was actually one of the goals of the TFP foam inserted into the shoulders of the paddle to reduce vibrations. Another goal was to enlarge the sweet spot, and I'd say this goal was also met. I'd say the sweet spot on the Perseus IV is similar to the Mod, which had an oversized sweet spot, and it's slightly larger than the sweet spot on the Perseus 3S. I'd characterize the feel of this paddle as closer to the Mod TA15 than the 3S in terms of its plushness and springiness, but the Perseus IV has a denser feel, less vibrations, and it's less powerful than the Mod. I found both the 16mm and the 14mm paddles to have plenty of power, but not too much so that control is overly compromised. Of these two thicknesses, I'm still on the fence in terms of which is my favorite. I do like the better hand speed and poppiness of the 14, but the plushness and the better dwell on the 16 is also really nice. And I don't usually like thinner paddles, so the 14mm really impressed me. If you prefer more pop than power and good hand speed, then the 14mm is probably your option. By pop, I mean the velocity you get on the ball with shorter strokes like flicks, speed ups, and counters at the kitchen versus power, which is found in shots with full swings like serves and drives at the baseline. I I found both of these paddles, so the 16 and the 14, relatively easy to control considering their level of firepower. The 16mm option's slightly easier to control than the 14 because it's not as poppy. Working my way through the midcourt, resetting the ball, and the soft game felt pretty intuitive with both of these paddles, especially the 16mm. And when it came to being aggressive, both of these paddles offered plenty of options. If playing aggressive at the kitchen with pokes, speed ups, and flicks is your game, then the 14mm is a fine choice. So it's too early to say whether or not these paddles will experience significant break-in. JOOLA did provide us with used paddles at the launch event, which had been hit thousands of times with balls projected by cannons and swung mechanically into a rubber stopper. And my recollection of playing with these used paddles is that they hit only slightly hotter than the new paddles I've been testing since. They also had a slightly lower tone and had a plusher, more forgiving feel. My initial impression is that these paddles will not break in like the mod. So that's to say I suspect they won't get extremely hot and then basically just break. And the reason I say that is not just because of the used paddles I played with at the event, but also because they're not using compressed cores with the Pro 4 paddles like they did with the mod. And these compressed cores were the primary culprit for these paddles breaking. That being said, I'm not going to sit here and say that these paddles will not break. I've heard very few reports of the 3S models breaking, but there's more going on in the core of the Pro 4 models with the addition of the high-density foam in the shoulder area. This adds more complexity and more interfaces between different materials that could potentially break down. So if you're at all concerned about break-in and breakage, similar to what happened with the mod, then I'd recommend waiting until these paddles hit the mass market and then hearing reports from the thousands of people that will be using them. So there you have it. In terms of overall feel and performance, I'd say that this paddle is the best that JOOLA has released to date. And I trust this paddle's durability more than I did the mod and the Gen 3s before it. Now, I'll say it again, I can't be 100% certain that these paddles won't break. We haven't had enough time with them to know for sure. So if you're concerned about this, I just basically recommend until a whole bunch of people have played with them for a good amount of time and then look for the reports of breakage. But yeah, these are really good power paddles that do many things right for this category. They have good firepower, but not so much that you're sacrificing too much control. They also feel good when you hit the ball. There's no weird vibrations, and the face feels soft and predictable. Would I personally pay $280 for this paddle? That's a tough one. There are cheaper options out there that have similar performance. Granted, nobody's using JOOLA's exact same technology yet, but there are foam-enhanced power paddles out there in the sub-$200 range, such as the 11624 Power Series. But I also suspect that these JOOLA Pro 4 paddles will be very popular, and many people will be willing to pay this much for the newest technology and for paddles that objectively play great. I would love to see a hybrid shape from JOOLA. I know that they already have a bunch of shapes, especially now that the Agassi shape is out there, but currently there's nothing between the 16.5-inch elongated paddles and the 16.0-inch wide bodies in the JOOLA lineup. Something that's in between both in length and width with a long enough handle for two hands, I think would be a great addition, especially with the TechFlex core. If you found this review useful and you decide to pick up one of these paddles, consider using my affiliate code Johnkew or purchase through the link in the description. Eventually, this will give you a 10% discount, but in the meantime, it doesn't cost you anything more and it helps this channel. Okay, that's it for now. As always, thank you for watching and I look forward to seeing you again in the next video.